Call to order the Ashland Board of Commissioners meeting for Thursday, September 23rd, 2021. We'll start with invocation by Commissioner Good and Pledge of Allegiance by Mike Wertz.
Let us pray. Lord, we thank you for another day in our city. We thank you and give you the credit for every good thing that we are able to do on behalf of our citizens and the community that we serve. We come this noonday asking for your wisdom and guidance as we strive to make further decisions for our city and its people. Bless our city manager, our staff and employees, our citizens, those in attendance today, and our listening and viewing audience. We pray you'll be with us now in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Let us stand and salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Do we have a motion to receive and file the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Do we have a motion to receive and file the minutes for the regular meeting held on August 12th, 2021?
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Hearings and reports, commissioners?
You want to go ahead?
I've been really busy, but I can't think of a thing to report on, so I'll yield my time to you, Amanda.
Thank you. And I just have a real quick thing, just because I was excited about it. We, Ashland in Motion, the planning committee for the event that was Brunch and Browse, met last night and had a fantastic meeting about how we're going to move forward with that event in the face of COVID. And we've got some great things planned. It actually will be a lot longer event. We're looking for a month-long shop small process. So look for that coming up. We're in the process of planning that, and it's going to be great all the way around. That's all I have.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Want me to go? Okay. Just want to say thanks to Mayor and Commissioners for covering for me for a while I was out. It's okay
you
to
out?
do that sometimes. Also, Pogue Landing Days was great. It was thanks to that committee that put that event on. We really enjoyed that. While I was there, I talked to Christy Harris, who owns the new Appalachian art business in the arcade, and she told me a cool story about a couple that came in, and they had come in on the Amtrak train traveling, and they were from Williamsburg, I believe, and just I said, well, how'd they randomly end up in Ashland? Well, she said, because she found the website, and our tourism group are just doing an amazing job. We all sing the praises of that, but I love those random stories about people that find us. Those are measurable things that are happening that our tourism group's doing, so we appreciate that. Okay, let me get a breath. Foxfire coming up this weekend. Paramount has done an amazing job getting that event ready. Going to be a big event for our city. Some major acts that'll be there this weekend. So if you haven't gotten tickets yet, check it out. They're still available. I don't know if you guys are going to talk about Taco Week in Hispanic. Okay, so you guys will talk about that. But we appreciate the partnership with Visit AKY, Ashland for Change, and everybody that's involved in Hispanic Heritage Month. It's a very cool thing for our city to be doing. So we appreciate you.
You went to ribbon cutting too, didn't you, Josh?
I did.
Was it Jeremiah Holmes?
Yes, Core Health Center is awesome place.
And they're located in the old Desco building down
Right,
there next to.
Right by Steak and Shake.
And then we got another one tomorrow. What's the other one?
That's BU. It's a business that's opening up down here, I guess a block away, or 2 blocks away from the city building. Mm-hmm.
While you were there, I was at Dee Dee's Barber Shop out in South Ashland. She laughed. There's not much here, but
You mean on your head?
Yeah, on my head.
Not in
Or
it.
in your head.
Boy, that was a great opening. I mean,
Well played.
but anyway, I was happy that she's out in South Ashland. Remodeled that little barber shop there. It looks good. South Ashland is coming along.
I think I was her second customer on the day she reopened.
Yeah, it
I was
shows.
in desperate need of my neck being trimmed. Anything else?
That's all.
Okay. I do want to mention something real quick. You know, there's been a lot of talk on social media about a steel company looking for a location. And we all know it's important, obviously, to our community that we redevelop existing industrial sites. And I can assure you that we're doing all we can as a city. Spoke to our commissioners and spoke to our even our state officials about making sure we're doing all we can to remediate properties that are important to us and also to market those properties. Yesterday I had a phone call with our good friend Rocky Adkins, and it was very productive. He talked about how he was pulling people in the private sector that have interest in properties here, as well as our state officials, environmental officials, pulling them all together to do what they can at the state level to see these properties redeveloped so we can get jobs, industrial companies to reinvest in our city. And I know that Rocky is fighting hard for us as a city, and I appreciate him so much, as well as all of our governmental officials at the state level. So I just wanted to touch on that, since that seems to be circulating widely on social media. With that, City Manager?
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick things before we go into our water quality study briefing. I mentioned last week the progress on Dixon Street. I have what I believe is the final answer from the Louisville HUD office. I'm still following one more thread at the federal level, but we are going to hold as soon as possible, as soon as we can get a facility coordinated, a public hearing or a public session with the community members there so we can give them an update. Our goal is to get pavement on that road as soon as possible, and we're engineering is working hard to make that happen. We'll have door hangers on the date, time, location, and we'll also do a mailing to the folks in that neighborhood. Second thing is recycling numbers have still been very low, so please go on, look at the hours for the recycling. We'd like to see those go up. We're also going to send out a flyer. I think a lot of people, like my family, have just not gotten back into that habit. It's not been intentional. Just have to move the recycle can in the house, things like that. So please, I encourage our citizens to utilize that great facility down there. Third is on COVID. I wanted to share an update with you on those numbers. We've had 26 positive employee cases out of the 74 total exposures. 21 of those were in August and 5 were in September. Comparatively, I've briefed this in the first and second surge. That was March 20th to October 20. There was 13 cases. The third surge, which was from November 20 to January 21, there was 26 cases, and now what we consider the fourth surge, we've tied that. We're at 26 cases. So we're about in the same percentage as the rest of the community and what they see in the hospitals at this point. The last thing I have before I turn it over to Blue Water is that VC3 is going to be on site Monday to start their onboarding. We expect them to have control of the system within about 2 weeks. So we had a pre-meeting with them this week. We're very excited about that, getting a virtual chief information officer, getting that team on board. It's going to be a team of about 5 or 6 people that are come down and get the system set up. And I wanted to let you all know that. So the next thing, transitioning, we've got Mr. Greg Heitzman and Pete Goodman from Blue Water, Kentucky. They're going to set this up, but in a nutshell, this is part of the city's ongoing effort to meet the requirements that were put out in the agreed order with the state from, I think it was the spring of 19. We began work on it in the spring of 18. And Mr. Heitzman, you'll likely recognize him. He was here a couple years ago with the Blue Water study, and some of this absolutely has bled over into some of the work that he did there. So with that, Mr. Heitzman, it's great to see you, and thanks for coming down today.
Thank you, Mr. Grazy. Is it okay if I pull this down or take off? I want to make sure I follow your policy. So thank you for the introduction. We really appreciate addressing you, Mayor, and the commissioners, and congratulations in your new role over this past year. If we can go on and tee up the presentation and get a little bit of background while we're doing that. Again, my name is Greg Heitzman. I did some work back in 2017 and 18 with some recommendations regarding your distribution system. And then I'm going to take you through our history here since we started this work dating back to 2018. Joining me here today is Pete Goodman. Pete is formerly with the Kentucky Division of Water, and he joined Louisville Water Company about 18 months ago. And as many of you all are aware, I'm retired from Louisville Water Company, served as chief engineer and also CEO of Louisville Water Company. So I've got about 35 years or so with Louisville Water and experience in the water. And much of what I do today is help out medium and small systems throughout the state of Kentucky. So it's time for me to get back to the state of Kentucky and with the knowledge that I've been blessed with over the many years. So, Michelle, looks like we got a little technical. And tell me if I need to do anything. What I do is give you, as we're pulling this up, give you a little bit of background. There we go. Thank you, Michelle. Okay, I'm going to read off the screen here today, but a little bit of background and history. Mr. Gracie, he teed this up. Historically, Ashland had a number of compliance issues with drinking water dating back 2016, 17, 18 timeframe. They were primarily with two issues, and we use a lot of acronyms as engineers, but DBP is disinfection byproduct, and then chlorine is essentially the disinfectant that we keep. And they're two competing regulations. So you solve one, you can create a problem with another or vice versa. So that's really why we're here, and we were contracted with Blue Water in partnership with Louisville Water Company to come in and help you address the findings of the agreed order and then what is called an action plan for corrective action. So this is just a slide of the history. There's a whole host of documents. You can read the dates. Again, this started back in 2018, and my observation would report to you today is since 2018, there's been significant improvement in the performance and the operation and the cooperation and communication by the Ashland Water Management Team. So I'm going to take you through this. We planned for about a 15, 20-minute presentation. I want to be respectful of your time. If you've got questions, it might be good for me to get through the entire presentation, but certainly if you've got a question, and you just let me know if we're running too long, we can speed it, we can dial it up, we can turn it down. So a little bit of the background. Okay, we'll go next slide here. So this is just for documentation. This has been a process. There's some key dates. We started this back in June, right in the middle of COVID in 2020. And we had a workshop in October, then another workshop in June. This did take a little bit longer than expected, mostly because of COVID and coordinating. But what we were able to do is meet a deadline by July 1st, and we submitted the report, the hard copy report that you have, to the state Division of Enforcement Compliance by the deadline that was provided. And today, in September 23rd, we're presenting a summary of the report that was given to the state, including our recommendations. This slide just shows the process that we use. This is an industry standard process, but essentially what we wanted to do was help you to meet the agreed order requirements, and that will be closed out by the end of this year. We want to help you optimize your treatment process, minimize the formation of the disinfection byproduct residuals, maintain the disinfectant chlorine residual in your system, and then enhance your customer service overall. So that's our objective of this study. The current challenges, and I really color-coded this, you can read these, but essentially the pink codes were the years where there was some compliance challenges that tally up. But you've had several clean years, so to speak. No compliance, those are highlighted in green. No compliance issues the last several years, which is a good story. Whenever you get into a situation like this, sometimes it takes clearly months, some cases years, to be able to pull out. Your challenges there are listed for disinfection. I've already mentioned it's the treatment processes that are used. And then on the distribution, as you all are well aware, you have some aging infrastructure with your 300 miles of pipe, and that's causing a challenge. And the two are directly linked to one another. You can have the best water quality leaving the plant, but if you put it into an aging distribution system that's corroded, it creates problems, both in compliance as well as with customer satisfaction. So I'm going to turn this over to Pete Goodman. Pete, you step up. I'll hand this over to you. Pete's going to cover a couple slides on the water treatment, then I'll be back to talk about distribution.
How do I forward this to you? Okay, the right arrow, still in English. Thanks, Mayor, Commissioners, appreciate the time. Part of this was a fairly easy lift for us in the sense that we treat the same river at Louisville. We have a lot of experience with the water quality challenges in that river. So it's different if you were working with somebody with a different water body. So it was helpful. The other thing that made it a fairly easy lift is that from the operators through the superintendents to the engineers, manager, everybody was receptive and competent and willing to hear it. That makes a big difference. And so a few things we wanted to look at were sort of looking at, well, we had an ad hoc thing come up right after we started. We had an emergency response for a caustic feed blockage. But we were really here to look at the water quality and treatment to determine the cause of these elevated disinfection byproducts. That was your significant compliance challenge. And then an evaluation of pretreatment carbon for removing precursors, the precursors that created those disinfection byproducts. And then an assessment of corrosion control and water stability. So on the treatment recommendations, let's get right to the sort of ad hoc issue with there was a significant blockage on a pipe where it really affected the capacity, the flow capacity, feeding and a pH adjustment and carbonate, and you had some precipitation in that pipe downstream of the feed that restricted the flow. So we had a recommendation to basically split that and move it to closer to the clear well, split it, use a quill that sort of distributes that rather than coming out of a single drip, but use what we call a quill to better distribute it, and taxi water. That allowed for more thorough mixing and more even distribution of the caustic in the system before it was put into the distribution system. One of the things we talked about is making sure SOPs, developing standard operating procedures for treatment and of course distribution, and we live by those. We're a utility that serves 1 million people directly or indirectly, and SOPs are critical to making sure that people know what they're supposed to do, and that you have constancy in how you manage your system. So what we were evaluating was adding carbon to reduce the total organic carbon in the river, and that varies from season to season. It can be a much bigger issue during low flow and warm weather because of algal blooms and nutrient contributions to that. So we did a lot of study on what we call different river conditions using what we call jar tests to remove and test the effectiveness of feeding. Oh, did you see that? It's gone to sleep on me. Oh, that's okay. I can keep going. So we did a lot to see how effective that PAC or powdered activated carbon. Right now, the feed for that carbon is in the plant, and there's not much residence time for that feed, which does not optimize your ability to remove those total organic carbons or other river conditions. And so we made a recommendation. Well, we recommended moving there we go. The feed location for PAC to, is it the third base or first base option near the plant, that the star on the right, to feed it through a manhole and down into this is the main raw water feed up from the intake at the river to and to the reservoir, or to feed it at the reservoir. These options provide a significant contact time between that powder activated carbon, and that's kind of like the stuff you have in your filter, your refrigerator filter or a Brita pitcher. They're using similar things. They're using granulated activated carbon in those filters, but it's the same kind of thing. Powder activated has more surface area per volume, and it's very effective in rapid removal of contaminants, organic contaminants. And we also recommended to maintain the plant carbon feed for redundancy. If you have redundant systems and there's something that's going wrong, it's always good to have that redundant. So this recommendation positions Ashland to deal with those seasonal changes in taste and odor, total organic carbon, and also spills of organic materials into the river you do have a major industrial refinery just upstream of you, and you have to be cognizant that that poses a significant threat. And this provides an opportunity for Ashland to better address any events that may result from failures at that plant. The third thing we really got into was water corrosivity and stability, and basically our recommendation in the near term is to collect a certain amount of data. It's a data gathering exercise. Corrosion and stability recommendations are important, particularly given the upcoming lead and copper rule revisions that are going to be in effect, I think, December of '24. Louisville Water's spending an enormous amount of time and resources planning for that. We have an older system like you do, with a lot of unknowns of both public and private service lines. We think we know about how many we have for public lines, where we've removed all the known, but we find them here and there. And we have between 800 and 1,500 lead and/or galvanized private service lines, but that's of what we know, and we're gonna, all the unknowns under the new rule are lead unless you can demonstrate otherwise. So that's a big lift for any utility, small, large, and you're a larger utility. So one of the things that you're subject to is potentially having to do a corrosion control study if your 90th percentile of lead results are above 5 parts per billion. And I know I left you in the dust on that one. The 90th percentile reading is that only 10% of those samples above the 90th percentile or above whatever number. But the 90P number at 5 is a critical thing, because the state could look at you and say, we need you to do a corrosion control study. And that is not a small lift.
Do we know where we are?
Bill, I don't know where you're, oh, sorry, I didn't know we had it back. Bill, do you know where your 90P is? Or anybody know where the 90P is? I don't remember. Because I don't know, they only have to do the monitoring every 3 years, so I'm not sure the last time. We had it last year's, ours was the lowest we'd ever had it. But they are in compliance. Actually, there is no system in Kentucky that's out of compliance with the lead and copper rule, including Ashland, which is good. But the new rule is going to be much more formidable and a lot of additional requirements. So we're trying to get Ashland to, we're recommending that Ashland starts collecting data to set that conversation up. So again, just to summarize, our treatment recommendations is to relocate the caustic point. And that's been done, and it's working really well. And the fix on that caustic thing really immediately affected capacity. The principal recommendation is to install a carbon feed point for powdered activated carbon into the 24-inch raw water line at either on the way to the reservoir or at the reservoir, and conduct a trial use of PAC. We're very confident that PAC is going to manage the TOCs very well, because we do it all the time. Not every day, but we feed PAC whenever TOCs get to a certain level. And then you have to develop a carbon dose strategy, and then we get, collecting enough data, you can evaluate the benefits of raising the pH to reduce water corrosivity and help stabilize water in the distribution system.
Would that be like the softness of water?
That's correct, or how hard or soft it is.
Okay.
It really has to do with how
Acidic or alkaline?
aggressive the water is relative to the pipes.
Do we know what it's pretty good, I'm assuming,
Or pH now?
pH?
Yeah, so. I can cover that if you want. Yeah, because I can't quite see the numbers from here.
The chart up on the right,
Oh, here it is.
that's a historical trend over time, going back over 10 years. And the red line, essentially, if I recall correctly, is the pH, and the blue line is what's called a Langmuir index. That's a corrosivity index. The point we wanted to bring out here is these are averages. Over the year, it has varied. We'd like to tighten that range to be more consistent. So the name of the game in meeting regulations is essentially you stabilize your treatment process and get within a narrow range of compliance and then stay there. Because the more you're varying your water quality, your pH, your alkalinity, the more you can solve one problem, but then you create another problem. So right now, you're doing good, but in summary here, there's 3 things that you'd be looking forward in the future. One is your treatment and filtration. You've rehabbed all those. Let that ride over the next 12 to 18 months. You've been 9 months into this. Let's keep that going and monitoring how effective it is. That's a checkoff box. So we're not going to change anything there right now. It's working good. The second one is the carbon. That's the biggest takeaway in this entire study. You guys got to get a second carbon feed in. It's the most important recommendation. And the reason is it's a backup to spills, and it will help get better water into your distribution system. So out in the far reaches, you're not in trouble. So
Gotcha.
if you start off with poor water quality, it's going to get worse. If you improve the water quality of the plant, you got a better shot down at the
All the way
fringe
down
of the
the
system,
line. I got you.
including your wholesale customers, consecutive systems. This last one is fine tuning, and you never want to change more than one thing at a time, because then if something goes wrong, you don't know what caused it.
Right.
So there's 3 areas here. Carbon's first. You've already taken care of your filters. And this last one would be after we get the carbon done, you're collecting the data in preparation for this lead and copper rule. And then it's a tweaking or a small dial to adjust, to fine tune. And then what happens is from that point forward, you're well in compliance, you're ahead of the curve, and then your focus goes to your distribution.
Greg, you might mention, I didn't mention it, but in the meantime, working on inventory.
Yeah, this lead and copper rule is coming down the road. It's going to be very onerous. There is going to be federal money to help pay for this. But what's important is we've got to start working. It will be a federal requirement to inventory all lead and any galvanized following lead. And you have some of those. So we've got to invest in the resources to begin to build the inventory database. And the reason it's important is the proposed reg says if you don't know what it is, it defaults, you will have to treat it as if it is lead.
So when you
yes,
say
yes,
it's
ma'am.
coming, when will that be?
The Trump administration had finalized it, and then the Biden administration stepped in February and said, time out, we want to look at it. So they told us within 6 months. It's been 6 months. So we expect sometime within the year that the final reg will come out. And what will happen then, there's always a period of time. Right now, we're expecting the soonest compliance date will be in 2024. That likely will slide. But now you've got the time to begin to build the database so that you're in preparation for when the regulation comes out. And this is impacting every water system in the United States. The good part about it, in the proposed Biden infrastructure plan, there are designated funds proposed to address replacing lead service lines, which you should be in a position to apply for to get rid. You do not have entire lead service lines. You have parts and pieces that I'll show a picture of here. So you're positioned here to take the proactive steps to be prepared so you don't have a compliance issue with this proposed lead and copper rule. Okay? So part 2 is distribution. And on treatment, by the way, on treatment, it is prescriptive engineering solutions to meet a specific threshold of contaminant below a certain level or above a certain level. Chlorine above, essentially disinfection byproducts below. And so those are engineered solutions. When you get into distribution, it's an entire best practice approach, is the approach to address. So it's going to shift here a little bit. Part 2 is really where the state wanted you to focus, is on your distribution system. So a little bit of summary here, just background, 300 miles of pipe. Mr. Grazy, I looked up 20 pump stations that you've got. Distribution piping, we already mentioned, you've got unlined cast iron galvanized. You have an aged, challenging system that parts of it are over 100 years. And you must begin to address it, and you have over the last 3 years. I'll show some data here. So this is just an overall summary. You have a challenge in that you've got the lower elevations by the river, and then you have this terrain as you go out into the county. That's a unique challenge that you have that some other systems don't. So this is just a schematic we put together to help your staff, but it shows you the complexity of this system. It's not a simple run it by your iPhone or your smartphone. It's a complex system to operate for the size, for 300 miles of pipe.
I'm sorry, I'm giggling a little bit because it's got these tank numbers on it, or these tank names on it, and we had the discussion about the Logtown tank, and we didn't know where that was, and now we do. Now we do, it's East Park.
Yeah, I hope there's a copy of that in this book.
Page, 6-1, Cheryl,
Okay.
is where we are.
All right.
at Louisville, we developed this schematic because when I was in charge, I want one page where everything's on one page that I can, in an emergency, quickly understand
I
where to go.
appreciate this. Thank
So,
you.
so this will be for your senior staff, one of the most valuable documents that if you maintain it, you can fold it up and put it in your visor in your vehicle, that quickly be able to understand how the system operates. Here's your challenge here. There are three aspects to distribution water quality. The physical infrastructure condition, that is not a sewer pipe up on the top right. It is your water line with iron corrosion on the upper right. And those are unlined cast iron pipes that date back 50, 60, 70, 100 years. And we've got to address that, and you've begun to do that. Second is hydraulic management. That's the movement and flow of water. It's pressure, flow, storage, and pumping. You've got to balance all those factors. Then third is how do you manage the water quality inside item number 1 and 2. Here's the approach we took, is a best practice approach, and we looked at 6 areas that I'm going to take us through each one of these. So number 1 is asset management and planning. And there are codes up here. If you look at the code, there are many recommendations and a number of items that you're already putting in place. For cross-reference R6.2, and that first one, you can look in the back and see where that actual detailed recommendation. In some cases, I summarize these. There's more detail for your staff in the actual report. But essentially, we've already mentioned this, develop a database of lead and galvanized. Replace your lead and galvanized service lines. Anytime you expose one, you need to get the lead out. And with every main replacement, you have to teach your contractors and your staff essentially that if you discover lead, and that is a lead pigtail up at the top right, and that's galvanized on the lower right, is whenever you see lead going while it's exposed, and there's a procedure that will help you with on how to get that lead out. So while it's exposed, document it, and then get the lead out and remove it. Continue your annual main replacement program. I'd like to see you guys step it up a little bit more. You've got a good start, but I'll show you some charts where you're still short of what we would expect as an industry average. And then we're recommending that you build a 10-year capital improvement plan. You've started that process, and essentially it will position you with the state for securing grant funds. So here's your annual main replacement program summary. This is a chart of the main break frequency. Mr. Grazy, I looked up and annualized those number of breaks on the right. Your pace for this year is slightly ahead of last year. 19 was a lower year. Overall, the trend, when you average this, it's highly weather dependent. As you're aware, severe winters cause more main breaks. But generally, overall, the rolling average, it is declining, which is good news. The key point here is that you're 4 to 5 times what the industry average is. And we need to bend the curve. It took you 100 years to get to this situation. It's going to take you potentially decades to be able to get to where you need to. But it has to be the resolve of budgeting every year for main replacement. This problem will not go away on its own. Here's a chart that shows your annual main replacement. At least 1% of a year on 300 miles, that's 3 miles of pipe. You started from virtually 0 and you've ramped it up. Take a look at the chart on the far right. I can't quote the exact detail, but essentially if you're at a 0.2% rate, that means you're expecting these pipes to last 500 years. Typically, the life is 80 to 100 years. So it's so important to begin this process. You started it, and what we need to do is sustain it and grow it as budgets allow.
So I immediately want to combine those two charts.
I'm sorry?
I want to combine those two charts and see the correlation.
Go back?
No, I'm
sorry.
saying,
I'm sorry, combine the two.
yeah, to see the correlation, because obviously there's going to be. a
Right,
correlation.
there is a correlation. Again, you won't see immediate investment. I explained this down in Martin County that I do work with. When you fix this pipe that was breaking yesterday and last year, it won't break. But the system finds the next weakest link, and it might be right around the corner. So it has to be a sustained resolve over time.
Reed, does that sound familiar?
Okay, the second area, hydraulic management, I'll try to speed up here, is the state recommended, and it was not in the agreed order, but the state did recommend that you develop a system-wide hydraulic model. There is a dated hydraulic model that you have that was done a number of years ago. But essentially, this model will help you understand and manage the system. And one of our recommendations in the report, for two reasons. One, you need the additional resources and expertise, but also we need to begin to think about succession planning to be able to bring in. You're a size that would justify an in-house staff engineer, in my opinion. Obviously, the Louisvilles have entire departments of engineers. The smaller systems like Martin County do not. But Ashland is a size that I recommend, and I recommended this 3 years ago, that you consider bringing in a staff engineer that can begin to help Steve in his role manage, and it could be shared with both water as well as wastewater. And then evaluate the potential of merging existing pressure zones. Louisville has 4 to 5 major pressure zones, and there are over 15 in your system. And Louisville's is 4,700 miles of pipe, and Ashland's. Now, again, you've got a terrain challenge, but the system has just been designed that if you step back today, you would do it differently today. And recognizing you're 130 years old, 120 years old. So this is one of these things that as opportunities arise, your engineers with this model could look at how could you consolidate simplify some of the systems. And the big reason is, when I came in the industry, it used to be treated at the plant and then let it go. We didn't worry about what happened at the customer's tap. Well, now the regulations have shifted from the plant to the customer's tap. So we have to pay much more attention to how we smartly design water systems today for water quality that was not in the playbook when I went to school, 40 years ago. Next up is storage management. We talked about this before, but you are doing already tank cleaning. The inside of tanks get dirty, sediment builds up, that consumes the chlorine that you put in the pipe into the system. And you also can have plug flow. The water in the top heats up, never turns over, and then you have stale water. Then when there's flushing and fire, it pulls the stale water down, and essentially that's causing some of your problems. So continue your practice of cleaning. We did, in detail, extensive detail, provide some tips on best practices for documenting tank inspection and operation and circulation. And in fact, Steve told me yesterday is that you have a project coming up for the deboard tank to go in and put some aeration in there to get the water circulating. Again, 40 years ago, none of us did. We weren't taught to do that, but today that is a best practice. And so that's the last bullet is look over time, look at your troubled areas and look at getting your water in your storage tanks. You can't do without storage. You need it for fire protection and peak demand, but you can better manage it within the tank. Water quality monitoring, there's a lot of technology that is available now that on your smartphone to be able to monitor and manage your distribution. I did put the charts on the far right. The big takeaway there, it's over years, is you were above the red line, which was the compliance. In the last several years, you're now below that red line is the compliance, the regulatory limit. So you now have some capacity. We want to improve that and give you more freeboard or more safety capacity. So another point, you have a very good Ashland Cares program that we can pick up water quality complaints from customers. Customers sometimes will be the leading indicator of a potential problem for you from just their taste and their smell. And you need to correlate that and track it as a proactive indicator of performance and respect the input that you can get from your customers. You've got a platform to do that. Let's put that to use and then look at mapping. Distribution system flushing, you're already doing that. There's some automated flushing tips that are included, but clearly continue your ongoing flushing program, and there's some things you could do to enhance that are already underway. Booster chlorination, some far reaches of your system, you already booster chlorinate in the East Park system because you've lost the chlorine residual. But remember, if you put too much chlorine in, then you create those disinfection byproducts, so it's a double-edged sword. You're kind of trapped, so to speak. So you have to manage it. You have made an upgrade in your booster chlorination station with new pumps. You've put a quill in and taxi water. So now you've got a best practice system at the East Park location. There's some other locations you should look at doing the same technology at the other locations, the trouble spots out in the perimeter of your system. So that's the second bullet there. This was an add-on. We weren't thinking to do this in the additional scope, but there's a tremendous and unprecedented amount of funding. You've already applied and received some funding already for these projects. There is going to be more funding made available. This is a summary. One, you have to have a clearly defined plan. Otherwise, the state's going to say, you don't know what you're doing. So you can build that in-house, or you can get consulting experience, or a little bit of both. But for your system size, Louisville has a 20-year plan. Ashland should have at least a 10-year plan of capital projects, and you've begun to build that. And then what we call a financial pro forma, which is taking the investments that are needed and projecting out what finances, what rates, and what borrowing may be needed. So that's the first bullet. Your second is, I recommended for both water and wastewater that you look at identifying as much as $50 million of potential projects. And the reason is there's current American Rescue Plan Act funding that is available now. There's going to be a second tranche of funding a year from now that's going to become available. That's going to the states, the counties, and the cities. That's already a done deal, approved by the Biden administration back in February. There is the current Biden infrastructure plan that we're hearing debated. It will eventually come out. That has designated investments for water and sewer. You need to be positioned to get your fair share of that. And then third, FEMA has funding that has always existed for resiliency projects, but there is a new program called BRIC, Building Resilient Infrastructure Communities. And you could be positioned to be able to take any of your projects that are right now in your mind conceptual. If you've got a summary of them, you can be quick to act to secure that federal funding for anything. A good example, the carbon feed system. It's not that much money, but it could be used because you're building in resiliency from natural disasters or man-made spills on the river. So you can be very creative to position yourself. Whoever does this best is going to get the first access to the money. So this is a summary of where you can go to position yourself both on the funding side. I also put number 3, you either do this in-house or there are now consultants. For example, Louisville Water Company, as large as they are, they retained a consultant, a national consultant, to essentially identify where they are best positioned to secure these federal funds. You may want to consider doing the same thing. It's not expensive, but it positions you well for the future. And then lastly, all this requires resources. And when I talk about resources, I was trained on quality training on the fishbone diagram. And essentially, it's not just the dollars. It's the people. It's the training. It's the equipment. It's the methods, the standard methods, all part of a quality-centric program. And so with this, there's a lot in here. We did prioritize these, high, medium, and low, and took sensitivity to your budget availability. But this report does not go into detail. That would be an engineer's role to do detailed estimating. But you need to be thinking about where will you get your planning resources, your engineering resources, your manpower for construction, in-house contract, also your materials and your equipment. The entire supply chain that we're all hearing about is a challenge, rising costs. And then finally, there is a shortage throughout the state. It's not a requirement that you hire an engineer, but it is state law and federal law that you have a licensed operator on duty 24/7. And right now, you're in good shape. But through retirements and a competitive marketplace, that may not always be the case. So you need to be positioning yourself to make sure you always have a licensed operator.
I'll make a quick comment on that, Greg. So,
Yes.
an interesting dynamic for the mayor and commissioners that we've got going on in both water and wastewater at this point, at least at the treatment plant. So I can't speak for water distribution or wastewater collection. But we've got much senior experience, a lot of gray hairs, as I said, and we've got a gap to a younger generation. And part of what Mr. Heitzman has touched on is that some of those have left for competitive reasons, et cetera. But somebody used an analogy in a discussion yesterday, I'm not sure who it was, but this might be a position where we look at trying to attract, like an NFL, trying to attract some veterans to come in and fill that middle ground as we develop, because we don't want to have that lump throughout our system to redevelop again, where they're all kind of hitting retirement at the same time. I've said this before in a public forum, and I really want to emphasize this because I think it's important to recognize what the staff has done in our training. I've talked to another city manager who told me they'll only have one certified operator because if they have more than that, that person will jump and go to another system. And all of our folks are in pursuit of their level 4 certification. So if you look across the board, we've got a ton of level 4 operators that are certified and a lot of young people that are aggressively pursuing that level 4. So I think it's something I want to share with you all. I want to share with the public. We understand training and how important it is in the certification, but we do have a unique thing right now with the age of our workforce. A lot of gray hairs, a lot of young folks, and we have a little bit of a gap in the middle.
The other comment I'll make, I'm a product of the legacy retirement system, and we have a new retirement system today that I'm sure you've been briefed on. I'm in Tier 1. I'm very fortunate. Folks that are coming in today, when I was recruited at Louisville Water Company, that was the recruiting promises, a great retirement system and great benefits, but not salary. So I'm sure across the board, in this competitive marketplace, it even adds that we don't have the retirement and the benefits to offer new employees like we did 10 years ago. So that's something that is a challenge for every municipal or county system in Kentucky. And I'm sure have thought about that and addressed that. Just a couple more slides, we'll wrap up. Any questions? Essentially, I covered this. We did with your staff in partnership, we identified all of the items as high, medium, or low, and there's a definition in the report. We also assigned general cost. Essentially, a low cost is something that's less than $30,000, medium between $30,000 and $250,000, and then high more than $250,000. There are 25 current and best practices. That's a good thing. When I went to Martin County, there were virtually 0. So you're well on your way. You've made significant progress and improvement. There are 18 high priority, 32 medium, 5 low. And that's just an overall summary. And this is all the detail in the report. We're not going to go through each one of those. I'm going to wrap up here, I think, with 2 slides. One on the right is, here's what you do with a report like this in having done many of these and having them done at Louisville Water and Louisville MSD. Louisville MSD, we had a state auditor come in and conduct an audit. So my recommendation to you is that your staff review these recommendations in a formal way, and they've already started that process. And essentially, you have to make a conscious decision and evaluate your resource and budget availability. It's not just the dollars, it's the capacity to be able to do this. And this is all in a spreadsheet, and you would identify, you may disagree with some of these recommendations. Just because they're recommendations, you do not have to agree with them. So you would look at them and make an assessment, and it might be that, yes, we recognize this is a high priority, but because of another externality or another perspective, we're going to consciously say we're going to move this to a medium priority, or vice versa. You may see a low priority and want to move it to high. So this is a professional opinion given to you for consideration for implementation. Then what you would do is you would develop an action plan. These are the items that we are going to do over time. And again, I mentioned to some of you, I always say the phrase, we're on utility time. And utility time is measured in years and decades and sometimes centuries, so recognize that. And then third is, I recommend that you go in your budget cycle as you're on a fiscal year July. So pull this out, your spreadsheet, pull it out every April, May, and just review it and say, have we done this? Color code it, use the stoplight approach. Green, done, checked off, that's good. Yellow, we're thinking about doing. Red, still a concern, but you would prioritize it. And then over time, something like this may need to be updated in 5 years. But essentially, it's a great document here that can be translated in from a consultant's recommendation to an operating tool that you can use. And then you can also set off of this annual goals for your performance. We didn't go into setting those goals, but that is a best practice approach that will ultimately get you recognition by the industry and get you awards from both the state as well as the industry professionals. So last slide here is a lot of positive takeaways. One is you are in compliance with the drinking water regulations. You've pulled out of the challenge that you had. That is phenomenal because once you get buried, it's difficult to get out. So kudos for that since 2018. Your management, there's a completely different change in perspective from when I landed here in 2017 into 17 and into 18. Completely different approach, and that is a credit to your leadership here with Mr. Grazy, with Mark, with Steve, the entire staff. we can really tell the difference, being able to see. And that can't be, they may not tell you that, but I'm telling you, it's a big difference.
Yeah, even the Division of Water will tell you that you flip the yeah, so, I used to be the head regulator, right, for the Division of Water, so I've changed hats. But I'm in contact with, the field folks, particularly Danny Fraley is a friend of mine in Moorhead, and you flip the equation with them. And Danny's a hard nut to crack, and very demanding, but, he's got a completely different perspective now, which is where you want to be. So that's a good thing.
And so because I know in air, I was at the co-plant, the state regulator is the one you interact with pretty mostly all the time. You don't interact with feds normally.
You don't want
hopefully.
to. If you don't.
Yeah.
Your state regulator is the one you're talking to most of the time, so that's
The
who you're
field
talking about.
office
Yeah.
Right,
folks,
Yes.
right,
the boots on the ground.
right.
Well,
Yeah,
I'll
if the-
say
if the
these,
feds show up, it's never.
Yeah, believe me, I know.
It's always bad.
I'll say the good thing on these 5 pages of recommendations is that some of them start with continue to. So I was happy to
means
see
you've
some
already
of
started.
those on there. Yeah.
That's right. And that's the key part is,
Yeah.
essentially keeping that practice up. As you're making progress, don't get rid of anything. So that's a kind of reminder. We didn't drop that, did we? Because of resource issues, or we lost the talent, or the equipment broke. It's a continuous improvement process. So a couple more points is, you clearly have moved from a reactive position to proactive. And again, we already mentioned many recommendations are underway or complete. There is a cost to implement, and we've covered this. Key takeaway is understanding it's not just the dollar budget, it's the talent, the resources, the people, the tools, the training, the methods. A roadmap, you need a 10-year capital improvement plan. Always remember, it's a plan for your governing body. It's not reality. It's a plan. It's not even a budget. It is a projection of what we desire to do, contingent upon the availability of resources. So just because it's in the plan doesn't commit any of you as elected officials. Essentially, it's the roadmap for the future going forward. And then funding. There is this unprecedented funding. If we were here 2 years ago, it would be, how are you going to fund this program?
Right.
It's through a surcharge that we mentioned, or a rate increase, or taking on more debt. Generally, I don't like taking on debt to replace pipes. You should be using your depreciation funding for that. There is unprecedented we used to talk about we don't have the funding from the 70s that we had in the 80s with the Clean Water Act. This is back. You're in a great position right now to be able to take advantage. So we'll entertain any questions, and I apologize for going over time.
I'd like to make a couple comments really quickly. Big picture wise, so for the agreed order, this was a major, having the water quality study done was a major part of it. There's a lot of other things we talked about, the CPE, that have already occurred. We have another significant thing that's ongoing right now. It's a capacity study. That's the last major chink that we have to get out of the agreed order. We expect that to be done in December, and then some administrative stuff to do, and then we're going to apply, and Mr. Cole, if I've misspoken, but essentially, and Mark, at that point, apply to get off of the agreed order that we've been on for a couple of years. For the community to know, we have the city, these elected officials have put $1 million a year towards pipe replacement. This year, it's $2.5 million a year. One of the numbers that Mr. Heitzman threw up was the $14 million in ARPA money, in addition to what we had a bond a couple of years ago of $11 million. This commission has decided to put all $25 million of that into utilities. There's 5 other things from the feds that they said you could put money into. This commission has decided not to look at anything else and put that all into utilities. To your point, Mr. Heitzman, it's a once-in-a-generation opportunity to try to get ourselves right, and I think everybody here understands that. I think the other, one other comment I had was just on that brick. I wasn't aware of that until our pre-briefing yesterday. That's something we need to get smart on and pursue that in addition to all the other funds. Mayor, Commissioners, I just wanted to add those.
I just have a quick comment, really a word of thanks for the recommendations. You know, I think we all sort of live and die by the mantra, if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And this gives us an outline of making that plan and a concrete plan to put the $25 million that we plan to invest in our utility system, because it's important to all of us. We realize we are behind the 8 ball on this, and we do have a unique opportunity to catch up on a lot of years that money didn't go into the system, and I think I speak for all of us, absolutely dedicated to that.
We commented earlier, you know, when we're passing all these water expenditures, it's not as sexy as what we talk about for doing something in the park that's highly visible. But it's so crucial to our quality of life here. I mean, we're talking about, you know, going beyond our regulations and things, but really providing the best water and safely to our people that we possibly can.
I'll state this, that essentially, safe drinking water is the number one
It's gotta be.
public health obligation that you
Yeah.
as elected officials have. If the water goes bad and people end up in the hospital, essentially, it will trace itself back to the water operation. We take it for granted because it's every day when you turn on the shower and fill up your glass of water, and you have good water quality. But essentially, it's very important to understand, it is your number one public health issue. It's just across this entire country, we take it for granted.
Another thing that, and we've talked to Michael and his staff about this, is about messaging. Because, you know, when you're spending that kind of money and it's mostly going underground or not to a place that's visible, a lot of it is telling your story. We have a group of people that we work with, and I would like to thank Ashland for allowing us to work with you on it, because one of the things we see in our culture is we're the largest utility in the state. We have sort of an obligation to work with other utilities to help them. We're in a very different position, and there are a lot of small utilities in the state that really struggle. And so we help them. And one of the ways we can help is developing messaging, so that becomes a public thing, so that they understand where you're putting that money and why and how it's good for the community. And we've offered to Michael to continue that relationship of putting things out there, helping you develop messaging tools and things.
It's great.
Very excited
Thank you.
about that.
Well, I want to echo your sentiments that obviously quality drinking water is critical, not just to the health of our people, but the health of our economy. And I think we would be remiss to not recognize the staff that has taken the ball and run with it. And I'd like for Bill and Frank, Reed and Dave to stand up. You all really do make a difference, and we have seen it in the reports we're getting, and we know that probably for too long we didn't previously fund you correctly to keep things going the way you all needed them to be. And I hope that our past couple budgets have shown our commitment to you all to make the difference, to allow you to do your job the best you can. And we appreciate you so much.
Real quick, just a couple of points, sorry. When I first started this year, one of the first documents I read Mark sent to me was the last Blue Water report. And I went through that just to kind of learn, because obviously water infrastructure is a top priority for us. So, you know, sometimes when you hear consultants, when the citizens hear consultants, they question that, whatever. The value of what you guys provide to us is extremely important. So not everyone will watch this. Very few people will watch this, to be honest. But the value of what you all do is extremely important, as we all know. You were talking my language quite a bit through there, because my job, we talk about process improvement a lot, and you were talking fishbone diagrams and things like that. So when you were mentioning engineer and the water plant, which, by the way, I learned pretty quickly, we do a heck of a job with the water plant. The water distribution is where, you know, we really have some challenges. But looking at that position, it's almost screaming when you're saying that, is process improvement, Six Sigma, things like that would really be, I mean, that's kind of what you're alluding to there. So yeah, and talking about regulation changes with the feds. There used to be a plant across the street from our water plant, and the reason that plant's not there anymore is because those regulations were coming down the pike. And that's one of the reasons why AK Steel shut that plant down. So the point is very well taken on looking at the gap, maybe doing a gap analysis between where we are and where we need to be. So incredibly important point there. And the last part, what you said about then versus now, 2017-ish versus where we are now, incredibly impressive. I'm fortunate, honestly, to
Yes, you are.
to be here, to be with a group that lived through all of that, and to kind of reap the rewards of their work, honestly. So thank you all, honestly.
If I can make one comment, what the industry, water industry's done is we've taken that Six Sigma approach, which is a lot of resources, from primarily the manufacturing industry. And we developed programs at the state level and the national level. One is called the AWAP program, which is a treatment program. There's also what's called the Partnership for Safe Water for both treatment and distribution. Embedded in this report is, once you get these basic improvements, then that is a methodical step-by-step process to then look at optimizing your entire collective process from source all the way to customer. You're creating the building blocks right now for that. It's too much, in my judgment, right now just to say adopt it. It's essentially baby steps. You're building the building blocks or creating the building blocks. And then what will happen is, I would say 18 months from now, get that carbon in, get these best practices in, then you'll be positioned to essentially start the process to achieve these levels of performance. And again, you'll get national recognition for that.
And a culture of excellence.
It promotes a culture of excellence. And then it's one that has a measured yardstick to make sure you stay on track.
We can use that to get people to move there.
Thank you all. Any
Thank
other
you.
comments, commissioners?
And certainly, if there's any follow-up questions, Mr. Grazy can let us know, and we'd be glad to follow up. So, thank you very much.
Thank you so
Thanks so
much.
much.
Very much.
Okay, at this time, we're going to have public participation. Anyone with a comment or request may come to the podium and address the commission concerning matters related to city business, services, or personnel. Would anybody like to come forward?
Hello, my name's Brandy Clark, and I'm the Tourism Director for Downtown Ashland. So thank you, everybody, for letting me come to give some exciting updates from the Tourism Office. The first one is that the City of Ashland is now officially a stop on the Lewis and Clark Trail. The Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail is approximately 4,900 miles long and stretches over 16 states from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to the mouth of the Columbia River near Astoria, Oregon. In 2019, Congress amended the 1968 National Trails Act and added a 1,200-mile section to include an auto trail from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to St. Louis, Missouri. With this addition, we became part of the Ohio River region, which was one of the rivers that Lewis and Clark traveled by keelboat during their trek across the country from 1803 to 1806. So this is a graphic of the complete trail now. That's the full 4,900 miles. It includes us. To help organize the addition of the auto trail, the Lewis and Clark Trust was tasked with choosing 25 points of interest in Kentucky to place Lewis and Clark National Historic Trail auto tour signage. Ashland was chosen as the first stop in the state of Kentucky, with our neighboring city of Greenup as the next. So for our region, the trail extension will increase opportunities for education, particularly the activities that happened in preparation for the expedition. The addition allows cities, counties, and states to work in partnership to promote outdoor recreation and tourism along the Ohio River and promote the preservation of cultural and natural resources. We've already reached out to our Lewis and Clark Trail Heritage Foundation Ohio Chapter President to find out what, if anything, Lewis and Clark had to say about the Pogue settlement when they came through here.
Oh.
So they're already researching that for us. And this is also an excellent opportunity for the Highlands Museum to have a new exhibit, teaching all of us about what Lewis and Clark did while they were here. So for us, now we're eligible for grant opportunities through the Lewis and Clark Trail Stewardship Endowment. The program funds sustainable projects intended to promote the trail, such as additional placement of wayfinding signs throughout our community to the main trail site, and the development of new construction along the trail, such as a park or informational building. So we've discovered that over 300,000 people travel the Lewis and Clark Trail annually. So that's a big deal. And the Ashland Visitor Center and other local businesses will be featured on the Lewis and Clark tourism website, and we looked, and in 2020, it had over 500,000 views. So people are looking. As people travel the Lewis and Clark Auto Trail, the Ashland Visitor Center will be an official location to obtain the National Parks Passport stamp for the Lewis and Clark Trail. And educators and youth programs and the museum have access to the Junior Ranger program. The educational component of the trail extension opens many new resources for teachers teaching history and culture in our region. So that is the new Eastern Legacy Auto route that was added. And you can see it starts in Pittsburgh, comes right through here, and goes all the way to St. Louis. I know more about the Lewis and Clark Trail than I ever thought I ever would be. But we got our official auto trail sign a couple of weeks ago, and we're excited for it to be put into place in its permanent location.
Very good.
Oh, wow.
Hoping, it has to be placed on US 23, so we're hoping to have it near the Port of Ashland.
Brandy, how long have you been working on this?
Zero. This was a happy accident. So we just took a phone call at the office one day, and it was a gentleman from the Heritage Foundation. He said,
No, you're
guess what?
supposed to say a very long time. I put in a lot of work.
The day I arrived.
It was,
Not a politician.
we just answered the phone. So he said he chose Ashland because of the Ohio River, and they had to have come through here. And a fun fact, the Ohio River was so shallow then that they were basically using a gondola boat and a stick to shove themselves down the river. So I think that's very interesting. Any questions on that?
This is wonderful news.
Fantastic.
It's so great. Yeah, I love it.
It's exciting. We're excited. We also, I reached out to Robin Webb, and she spoke about it on the Senate floor during the special session to help get the state involved and get some enthusiasm behind it, so.
Great.
So I-
You have put in work. You're
A
selling
little
yourself
bit of
short.
I'd say they found you because of some, because we're very visible now. May
Yeah,
have led to
probably,
that, maybe a
but-
little bit.
I mean,
Yeah.
I did not make a phone call to make this happen.
When we took our trip last week, or 2 weeks ago, when we were going out that way, we went up, out of Kansas City north into Nebraska, so that the trail connects right there. And I didn't know anything about this today, but I remember seeing those signs and thinking, that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
I just think for a lot of good reasons, we're fortunate to be on the river.
I think we take it for granted,
Yeah.
and it's one of those
I
things
mean, our
that
water,
we-
I'm reading about
right.
water shortages out west, and we're very fortunate that we've got that river right there.
and I think we need to utilize it more.
And I agree.
Speaking of the riverfront, obviously the riverfront is closed while they're putting the stage together for this event, but there is a hole at the top that has been dug out, and it's not because we're just digging holes for fun. There is actually going to be the restoration of the flags. Our flags will be relocated on the riverfront, so that's in the process, and we're appreciative of that. But Brandy, we can't thank you and your team. You all do a fabulous job, and to Commissioner Bland's point, I see stuff every day that I didn't know about our town and our community because of the stuff you're all posting, and it makes a huge difference and inspires pride, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Am
Well,
I,
two
am I
more
free to
things.
post on Facebook now?
Yes, you can.
Okay.
You can share this now.
Oh, you
were
threatened me
not
before.
gonna steal my thunder. I've got two more things to share.
Well, yesterday, yeah.
We've got an upcoming Taco Week, which is, we're partnering with Ashland for Change to celebrate Hispanic Heritage Month, and it is October 3rd through the 9th. We've got 20 local restaurants and locations that are participating.
So
And for Burger
exciting.
Week, we only had 7. So this is gonna be a lot bigger. And we're gonna wrap up our week with a Latin Night Live that's gonna be at Broadway Square. We'll have a mariachi band, taco trucks, some drinks, probably non-alcoholic drinks, no alcohol. But yeah, it's gonna be a fun evening. Lots of culture, art, music. So there it is, Taco Week.
I'm just trying to figure out how I'm supposed to visit 20 different places in the course of 7 days.
Lunch, second lunch.
I accept the
first dinner,
challenge.
second dinner.
I will do it.
Yeah.
I love
And we've got a
Mexican
really
food.
cool
Does Marty have a
prize.
confident laugh right now?
Marty's like, I got this, I'm in.
We've got a
Trained
really
his whole
cool
life.
prize for the participants, so I highly recommend everybody take part. It's so much fun. And then finally, I got notice yesterday from Colby Hall, the director of SOAR, that we have been awarded a small event in March of 2022. So we didn't get the SOAR Summit, but they are giving us a consolation prize, so that's exciting.
Well, we'll make the most out of that.
We will.
Yes,
Yeah,
we
I
will.
told them we'd take
But
them
we
in any
came in second
capacity.
place, right?
We did come in second
So
place.
what would help us get that?
A
A
convention
convention
center.
center.
Oh, imagine that.
If we had the capacity of a convention center, we
We
would
would've had
have
it.
had the SOAR Summit here this October. And that was that's what cost it. So
Okay.
I've said my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Brandy.
Thank you, Brandy. It was wonderful.
Courtney, you do a great job, too.
I know, there's Courtney.
Yes.
All right. Anybody else would like to speak at this time?
Yes, I have a presentation.
Okay. Commissioner Spriggs has a presentation.
Can you just do it back here?
Yep.
You'll hold this.
Okay.
Michelle, can you get a picture? On behalf of the Pogue chapter of the Daughters of the American Revolution, I'd like to present this flag. And it says and this certificate, the accompanying flag of the United States of America was proudly flown at DAR headquarters in honor of the city of Ashland in honor of Patriots Day, April 19th, 2021. I would like to say we have a lot of patriots in the city of Ashland, not only the fire department and our police department, but those men and women who are out there at 2 o'clock in the morning working on pipes and frozen pipes and in the snow and just making the city work every day. They're all heroes. So this is all for you. Thank you. Woo!
For now. Okay.
Ready for consent agenda?
Hit it.
Yes, sister.
A resolution of the City of Ashland, Kentucky adopting, authorizing, and approving the course of action presented by the city manager on the items appearing on the consent agenda for the regular meeting of the Board of City Commissioners of September 23rd, 2021.
So move.
Second.
Okay, we have second. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
It's one of the things I wanted to comment on, Mayor, if I may. If you look at consent item number 1, to keep the community up to date, this is the 13th property this year that we've put out for demolition. 2 have been completely done, 10 are in the process of being executed, and 6 more are going out to bid. So we'll have a total of 19 properties that we're continuing to work on.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, that's great.
All right.
All right, new business, item A. First reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky, amending ordinance number 55, series of 2013, as previously amended, which fixed the days, the time, and the place for meetings of the Board of Commissioners of said city, setting the meeting time for all regularly scheduled meetings at 12 o'clock p.m. noon.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Item B, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky, authorizing and directing the mayor to execute a contract with Lights Enterprises, Inc. for the purchase of all labor, materials, equipment, and services for the demolition and removal of all debris of 3038 Simpson Road in the amount of $7,800 for the Department of Community and Economic Development.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item C, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky, authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with Ashland Community Kitchen, the subrecipient of $30,000 from 2021 Program Year Community Development Block Grant Funds for the Carroll Jackson Unity Center Food Program, and to prepare, prevent, and respond to the coronavirus pandemic.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in
Yeah,
favor?
wait
Oh,
a minute. What's that mean exactly? To prepare, prevent, and respond to the corona boom?
Essentially, this is Corona funding, and this is an initiative to better utilize the Carroll Jackson Community Center. This is in the 2021 project plan. Essentially, Community Kitchen will have a monthly food distribution, food box distribution, hopefully on Saturdays. Lorraine is still working that. Will probably cost about $5,000 a month on average, and we'll start in January. Lorraine, was there anything else that you had briefed me on that?
I'm going to interrupt for just a second. Based on the notes, that would serve approximately 75 families per month.
I don't understand how that prevents, I know, just digging in there, how it prevents corona. It's in a lot of these on here.
Well, what it is, we had separate funding with coronavirus, coronavirus funding, and that has to be recognized via how we do the ordinance
Okay.
on how that money's being expended.
Okay.
So,
It's just on a lot of them, and then some of them, the money was from 2019 and 20.
We have families that are having different challenges right now, especially financially because of the pandemic.
Uh-huh.
So this is one of the ways we're able to utilize that money.
Uh-huh.
As for the 2019, we have different, say, pots of money, say from 2019, 20, 21, and we're able to use all those different funds to fund services and activities.
Okay.
So that's why we're stating which year it's coming from, because when we send our.
It's got a budget, yeah.
We know exactly where that money's budgeted.
Okay, thank you.
just for
Yeah.
clarification purposes for, I think, your question, prepare, prevent, respond, one of the three.
That's
And
right.
this is response two.
Okay.
It's statutory
Am I-
language, and if you do any one of the three, you're fine.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Does that help?
Yes.
Okay, I had to get it in my head too.
Any other discussion on the matter? All in favor?
Aye.
Item D, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with Boyd County Council on Aging, Inc., DBA Ashland Senior Center, the subrecipient of $15,000 from the 2021 Program Year Community Development Block Grant funds to prepare, prevent, and respond to the coronavirus pandemic.
So move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item E, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with Community Assistance Referral Service, Inc., CARES, the subrecipient of $49,186 from the 2019 and 2020 program year Community Development Block Grant funds to prepare, prevent, and respond to the coronavirus pandemic.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item F, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with Hillcrest Bruce Missions, the subrecipient of $49,186 from the 2019 and 2020 program year Community Development Block Grant funds to prepare, prevent, and respond to the coronavirus pandemic.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item G, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with Salvation Army of Ashland, the subrecipient of $46,947.68 from the 2019 and 2020 program year Community Development Block Grant funds to prepare, prevent, and respond to the coronavirus pandemic.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item H, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute an agreement with Salvation Army of Ashland, the subrecipient of $15,000 from the 2021 program year Community Development Block Grant funds to prepare, prevent, and respond to the coronavirus pandemic.
So, second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item I, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and approving amendment number 1 between the City of Ashland, Kentucky and the Ashland Community Kitchen, the subrecipient of funds from the 2020 program year Community Development Block Grant, reducing the funded amount by $7,584.23.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item J, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and approving amendment number 1 between the City of Ashland, Kentucky and the Shelter of Hope, the subrecipient of funds from the 2020 program year to Community Development Block Grant, reducing the funded amount by $8,504.75.
So move.
Second.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye. Wow.
Item K, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, an ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute a music performance license agreement between the City of Ashland, Kentucky and SESAC LLC regarding the City of Ashland's right to perform member works.
So moved.
Second.
This is not so the mayor can sing.
I thought we were gonna cut a video.
Yeah, no.
yeah.
So,
Are you gonna be
City
directing
Manager, can you
it?
explain that just for the public to understand?
I will, but I think the Corporation Council would be much more effective.
Basically, there are three major music publishing firms. You've probably heard of, I think, BMI and, yeah, and ASCAP, and this is the third CISAC. And whenever you're the promoter of a musical performance in which they're licensed and copyrighted works are performed, there's a fee for that, and what they do with cities, based on your population, there's an annual fee, and they're very reasonable, and that gives the right for the performance of those works by any artists that are performing at any of our sponsored events. Now, it excludes separate events that utilize our facilities like Summer Motion, the Paramount down at the riverfront. They have their own, but this would be things in the park, things at Broadway Plaza would be covered by that.
Great, okay. Appreciate that. Any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Let's see, item L, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute a lease and service agreement between the City of Ashland, Kentucky and the Safe Haven Baby Boxes, Inc., providing for the installation of a newborn safety device at the Ashland Fire Department."
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion?
Just
just-
go ahead. You have a question?
Yeah, out of curiosity, who are we paying the $200 annual fee to?
The way this works, Commissioner, there's a nonprofit organization that actually has these baby box manufactured and promulgates regulations regarding their use and so on. And the way they work is they provide it to us, but then it's a leaseback situation. They own it, we lease it, and we pay an initial fee at the time that it's obtained, and then an annual fee over the period of 5 years, which is, I think, the $200. And that goes to them, to the nonprofit, for their continued operations and so on. It's anticipated, I think, that there's going to be an effort made to privately raise the funds to do this, but the actual lease agreement obligates the city for those funds, whether we raise it privately or not. But
And is the $5,000 for installation?
that's their estimate, and they give you very detailed processes of how you do that, and that's their estimation of what the installation cost will be. Again, we will contract with and have the installation made at our expense, but I think it's also anticipated, and Commissioner Clark, I think, is up on this, that that'll be part of the fundraising effort. We will attempt to raise funds for the entire $15,000 for the lease and installation of this device. But that's the extent of our obligation, whether we raise the funds or not.
Where exactly physically is it going to be placed in the fire department?
I think that we're still working with the Baby Boxes organization to determine that. There will be engineering involved in that, and we had a great meeting with the Baby Boxes organization as well as the organization that's looking to do the fundraising, and we're gonna work with them to publicize the fundraising, and we don't think there's going to be any issue with the funds. And like I mentioned before, even if the $15,000 isn't raised, there is a individual that is going to fund that.
Is this thing like a slide-out box or something?
They actually, if you, they have a website. They also have a Facebook page. The name of the organization, Safe Haven Baby Boxes Incorporated, if you want to look them up. And there's a lot of information on their Facebook page and on their website about how they go about installing the box, what the regulations are for keeping up with that box. Like Counselor said, that they actually put out we would have to agree to the guidelines that the box gets looked at so many times a day, so many times a week. There's a monthly inspection, and all of the $200 for the year goes towards making sure that all of that's happening.
I think the reason they actually do the lease back is because they want to maintain control of the standards that they set for these things. And if there was a city that didn't comply with all the regulations about safety and so on, they would have the right to take it back. And so it's actually an indication of the degree to which this is a very responsible organization. And
Do
they try
they
and keep
physically
control.
come and do the inspection?
They do an inspection once a year.
Okay.
Then we will do inspections just to make sure that
Yeah.
there's an alarm system that we inspect to make sure the alarm system is working. And we check certain things on a daily basis, other things on a weekly basis. And then once a year, they come in to do an inspection of the more technical aspects of the box to make sure everything's working properly.
And just for ease of mind, Chief Ray was part of that meeting and feels, I don't want to speak for you, but I think, feels pretty confident that adding those to the checklists that already happen at the fire department, daily, weekly, monthly, is not going to be that big of an issue.
And it's, just out of curiosity, have we ever had a baby left anywhere in the city, ever?
In the cemetery,
In the
Cemetery,
cemetery?
yes.
And there's actually, I think it was 16 that have been rescued through these boxes. I did a little bit of, Commissioner
From
Clark
all
remembered
over.
to do this, I did not, so I did a little bit of research
From
more
all
on it.
over, from all over
Yeah,
the country,
yeah.
16?
It's still a program that's in its nascent stage. It's
Okay.
originating out of
2016.
Indiana. I think there's only 16 or 17 boxes in total. I know on one of my discussion groups with city managers, a lot of folks are debating this right now for some of the same questions that you asked, Commissioner.
Well, the legislature in its
interesting.
last session enacted the enabling legislation, which allows this to be done and also grants a certain level of immunity from suit and so on to the city if we comply. So it is a new program. We're sort of on the cutting edge, so to speak, of this.
And what I found interesting, not to interrupt you, I'm sorry, what I found interesting about it, and in speaking with the woman that, I can't think of her name right off the top of my head, I'm sorry, that actually runs the nonprofit, what these do is add an extra layer to the safe haven laws that are already in place. You have the ability now to drop off a baby at a fire station, at a police station, at a hospital without the fear of retribution or backlash for that. What this box does is allows some anonymity to that and some confidence that you are leaving your baby safely, as opposed to dropping off at on the church steps or the hospital door.
Or the
The
cemetery?
box is secure. As soon as the mother closes the box, an alarm goes off inside the station that alerts dispatch.
Does
And-
911 also?
Yeah, it goes straight to 911, and so the idea, I left my baby outside on the steps is mitigated by, I've put my baby in a safe place.
It's just interesting because we've never done it, but I've never heard,
It-
yeah.
Yeah,
I had no idea that there was that
Such a
level of
thing.
legal protection. And I think that's the key point that has to be communicated so that it is used in that situation, is if you have to if you're at that point and you need to utilize this, you're not, there won't be a swarm of,
Yeah.
law enforcement. When you do that, you're allowed to do it.
Another aspect of this box that I learned in the meeting, it also gives us the ability to provide a packet of resources to the new mother, where to go for services and that sort of thing, when they open the box.
Yeah.
So they open the box, there's a packet that says these are your options, and gives a list of resources to that mother. And then, of course, she has the ability to decide if she's going to place the baby in the box or walk away with the child, so.
And that's developed by the nonprofit that's behind all this, which we, as you said, I've forgotten the lady's name too, but she was,
Should have written it down.
Monica Kelsey.
she was a
Oh, thank you.
retired firefighter, and then she was also a child that had been left
Oh,
someplace. So
really?
she has both a personal and a professional commitment to this program, and they've really worked hard and developed a lot of information.
One last data point, I misspoke. There's actually, staff points out to me, there's about 80 boxes.
Okay.
All right, any other discussion on the matter? All in favor?
Aye.
All right, item M, first reading and approval of an ordinance entitled, "An Ordinance to the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute a highway safety grant agreement between the Commonwealth of Kentucky Transportation Cabinet, the Office of Highway Safety for the Ashland Police Department for the period October 1, 21 through September 30th, 2022.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item N, a municipal order of the City of Ashland, Kentucky authorizing and directing the mayor to execute a surface transportation block grant program planning study and design reports grant application to the Kiowa Interstate Planning Commission.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item O, reading and adoption of a municipal order entitled, "A Municipal Order of the City of Ashland, Kentucky, extending the agreement between the City of Ashland and Ashland City Police Members, Fraternal Order of Police, Ashland Lodge Number 3, to December 31, 2021.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Item P, the mayor requests the board's concurrence with his appointment of Willie McCullough to the cemetery board for a 4-year term retroactive to September 17, 2021, and expiring September 17, 2025.
So moved.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
In item Q, the mayor requests the board's concurrence with his reappointment of Cindy Blanton to the cemetery board for the 4-year term retroactive to September 17, 2021, and expiring on September 17, 2025.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Commissioners, I ask for a motion to recess, but I ask for a motion to recess in memory of Brad Ray.
Amen.
Absolutely.
Before we recess, though, I have one other, are we done? Done, I have one other thing I want to bring up. Just short, briefly. Okay.
I think we're adjourning, aren't we, rather than
Are we
recessing?
recessing or adjourning?
Are we adjourning?
I don't
I'm sorry,
think we have
we
anything
are
to come back
adjourning.
on, do we?
No, we're good.
Okay.
We did that last week, didn't we? Or last, yeah. Okay,
If you haven't been out on Dixon Street yet lately, it's a mess. I don't think anybody in this room would want to live over there in that mess. So I think the whole commission here is wanting those people who live on Dixon Street to know we're going to get that thing paved over there. So, Mr. City Manager, when can we get on that?
That was the announcements I made at the beginning, Commissioner, that we're
What,
gonna
can
have
you
a.
go over it again?
Sure. We're gonna have a public hearing. We're just trying to get the location set so we can give an update. And our goal is absolutely to get that thing paved before the winter.
Okay, okay, great.
So, yeah.
They'll be happy to know that.
Yes, ma'am.
And anybody driving through there will be happy to know
It's-
that.
it's
It's
awful.
pretty awful, yeah.
Mayor, I
Thank you.
motion that we adjourn in memory of Brad Ray.
thank you. Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
This meeting is adjourned.
Thank